Hello, legends. Today, I catch up with Cub member Jasmine Chilcott, the founder and CEO of FixBIOME. FixBIOME is an education platform and gut health supplement company that is quite literally changing the lives of thousands of people by improving their gut health. People like me who suffer, I've suffered gut health my entire life from IBS and all these things the doctors tell me. Jasmine has opened my eyes to actually what's going on in my gut and the gut of millions of others, and how she's created this incredible supplement that has tremendous impact on your gut health, your mental health, your overall well-being. She's an incredible young businesswoman who's tackling a huge challenge and a huge issue in the world, which is gut health. And I had the best conversation with her. So enjoy the show. Well, I have been very excited to talk to you because I have a serial bad gut. Like, I always go IBS, whatever. I don't even know what IBS is, but I definitely have it. So when I read your prep sheet, and I was like, oh my God, maybe Jasmine can be the person that fixes me.
Oh, absolutely. Would love to. I mean, it's definitely a rising issue for people here in Australia and across the Western world. There's a lot of things driving that, so it's a pretty common thing.
But how did you get into the space? So your company's called FixBIOME.
Yes, people call it FixBIOME though, so we've kind of been renamed to FixBIOME, and I'm not sure. Sometimes I'm like, do we just take it? Do we just accept that that's what the customer thinks we're called? But no, FixBIOME accidentally fell into the space. So for context, growing up, I actually had a big fear of bodily fluids in general, both vomit, blood, all those kinds of things. But I got very bad food poisoning, and I happened to come from a medical family, and I struggled with my own gut issues for the best part of 3 years. I played Dr. Hop. In terms of my network of doctors, I guess I had the top line medical care. Like, my dad was a founder of a telehealth company, saw lots of gastroenterologists, lots of people in space. But unfortunately with gut health, 80% of all research has been done in the last, 8 to 10 years. So it's not uncommon for your local GP not to know about it. And there's also a lot we don't know about the gut still even today. So it's a very interesting space to be in.
And so how did you actually get into the business? So your gut was... you had your own gut problems. Mm-hmm. You couldn't solve it through the doctors. What were they saying? So what were they saying to you? Because honestly, I've done the same thing. Would you call it Dr. Hop?
Yeah, Dr. Hop.
I've Dr. Hopped my whole life.
Yeah.
And every time I go, and not just doctors, I've also tried there's kind of some gut specialists I went to and some whatever people. Because it's kind of a hot space. I feel like it's an emerging space at the moment. So a lot of people are becoming, a gut specialist or whatever.
Yeah.
Gut coach. But I've never really had anyone, I've done the stool tests, I've done all the blood tests, I've done all the tests, but no one's ever been able to say, okay, here's what's wrong, here's what you should do.
Yeah. On that, so with our testing, right, so IBS as a whole is actually a diagnosis of exclusion. So we go and look at, kind of what is the key things that drive this that we know. So you count factor, salmonella, we exclude all those. We know it's not that, but you've still got these symptoms, right? So we give you the diagnosis of IBS, and that's what happens to a lot of people, right? And in terms of the online tests and stuff, they're actually, we actually did a test, which was quite funny, where we ordered 6 different tests, and then for food intolerance actually, to get back a list of things you can't tolerate, and got different lists from all these different companies, right? So there's heaps of misinformation. It's actually quite dangerous too, because you're giving people a list of you should avoid A, B, C and D, and that actually we see it in our customers, but eating disorders and problems with, deficiencies and things like that, super common. So, my journey started when I started going to all of these doctors. Like you, I had all the tests done. I was diagnosed with general IBS. Stool test came back normal, bloods came back normal. You're fine. Okay, I'm definitely not fine. If you saw the photos, I was going to bed looking like I was pregnant. My skin, I had very bad psoriasis. I had acne. My hair was falling out. I was actually modeling at the time, and it was really messing with that. I was in law school, and it really did take an effect on my life as a whole. People don't understand just how much the gut does impact, and we can get into, if you'd like, the mechanisms through which that happens. But FixBIOME started when I couldn't get answers. I actually eventually did do my own research. So I started this education blog. So this is how we actually got into quite a saturated industry, which is supplements. To start with, is I really started, I was trying to do my own research. So I was on NCBIS. I was asking the doctors in my network, and I was then making this information that I was finding out easy to understand for the consumer. And I started posting this on Instagram. I started talking to other women. And unfortunately, the reality is when a woman goes to the doctor and she's like, oh, I'm struggling with bloating, I'm struggling with skin issues. Yeah, exactly. It's hormones. I was told to go on the pill. We often get hear of stories from our customers being like, I was referred to a psychiatrist, like, you're being dramatic, you keep coming back. It's like, no, these issues are really affecting them. And I was talking to Roy at the Gut Foundation at just how important the research here is at the moment. And I don't know if you've seen it, but just last year they found links between endometriosis and the gut, which is going to be an absolutely fascinating space that comes to play. And I just spoke to a leading gynecologist about that. But, my journey was I went to all these doctors, got really dismissed. If I had the best medical care you could possibly have, and I acknowledge that privilege, other people had this heaps worse. So I kind of started going through the medical literature. I had a pretty good understanding of medicine and medical dialogue as a whole, and making that easy to understand, so somebody like me could then go and take that information to their doctor and say, look, are you sure you've looked for this, that and the other? So eventually I actually did get I do a different type of test, which was a breath test, which most you can
I've done that. That's when you test for SIBO, no?
Yes. So I did that. Some of them came back abnormal, and I was put on antibiotics. That fixed it for a little bit, but then I kept relapsing. And if you look at the data, and I am I want to say this first and foremost, big supporter of modern medicine. It has a great role to play, and it has progressed us in many fantastic ways. But antibiotics can be overused, and they can also be misused. And with the gut, right? The gut is incredibly adaptive, so resistance is very common. And the treatment of antibiotics is often top line. So you might address that very top line issue, but you're not actually working on why the issue came to play in the first place. And when we see these issues like skin problems and, the link to mental health and stuff like that, that's not from the top line level. That's actually from the intestinal permeability that's taken place there. So I eventually stopped responding, just like the data shows. So there's a drug that's kind of used for this. It's called rifaximin. And I had good success with it, and it helped my gut for a little bit. But then I obviously stopped responding, and I kept going back on it, and then eventually I got no relief from it, and that's because we can become resistant to antibiotics. So I started to look into other things, and I came from a family that's like, supplements, fish food, absolutely redundant, stupid stuff, like, you
because they're doctors.
That. Yeah, but you pay that, like, you live in the Western world, like your diet's good, you don't have a problem, like you don't need it. But look, my dad actually, he was like, look, there is some emerging research, it shows natural antimicrobials and natural things might be able to be used to influence the gut microbiome, which would make sense because we know what we eat influences our gut microbiome, right? So maybe there's something here. And the good thing about natural ingredients is, they look a tiny bit different each time, and that was actually a really big challenge in our development process, because we sort of applied a pharmaceutical manufacturing process to natural actives, because, to the consumer, and this is why so many people have tried stuff that doesn't work, I can put banana on the back of a bottle and it can be at two different stages of its life, right? Like I can have a really green banana and a really yellow banana. That really yellow banana has a lot more sugar content than that really green banana. But to the customer, it's just banana, right? So I really wanted to create something that, can't say that, but that was helpful and impactful, if the TGA is listening. But so that meant that we really looked at our actives and we really focused on how the gut functions as a whole, because it's you swallow stuff. Saliva is your first thing that you've got to overcome. Then you've got your gastric juices, and you've got all of these other parts. And most supplements are designed for absorption into the blood, right? We want dispersion along the gut lining. We want the opposite. So you actually need to take a very different process.
Okay, before we get into the actual, what you've designed and the company and I guess these are problems you had to overcome in order to create a great product. I actually want to go back because the use of antibiotics in general, I mean, I was always told that antibiotics were horrible for your gut.
Yeah.
Like they kill your microbiome.
Yeah.
They kill everything basically, and you're screwed. So why would doctors prescribe antibiotics to fix a gut? And were you supplementing at the time with probiotics?
Okay, so the research on probiotics is actually, they're incredibly misused as well. Me and you have two very different gut microbiomes, right? There is no reason that we should be taking the same strain of bacteria, and there's actually no research to support that, we should all be taking this or all be taking that, right? But antibiotics being used, for me, one of the things I had going on was a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's used to treat that. So it's used to kill off some of the overgrowth that has occurred in the top of the gastrinal sort of tract. But what it doesn't do is obviously address the imbalances and the lack of diversity there. But no, in terms of probiotics, there's actually a lot of people in the space that really don't, there's a lot of marketing hype around them, right? But they don't really make sense as a whole, because the balance of your gut is very unique to you. So you can take a strand of bacteria and it can either, for you, it might be great and it might, really thrive with your colony of bacteria you've got there. But for me, it might overpower it, or it might do something else. Or, for a lot of people, it won't even do anything because it doesn't fit.
So is there a company though you can like submit your microbiome to, and they'll be like, okay, we can create a what's it fucking called? I just said the word. A probiotic that is tailored to you. That would be great business.
Look, there actually is research going on in that space at the moment about how the gut microbiome can be used. And funny you say that, but the best way to do it would actually probably be to go the opposite angle. So to repopulate from down under. I know that sounds like insertion, like I guess they
like
call
an
it
enema.
No, pharmaceutical grade poo. So you're populating your gut from the bottom instead of the top, because you're then getting it to the lower part where you should have more bacteria existing, right? So we're not supposed to have a heap of bacteria in our small intestine. We are in our large. So there's some companies that are looking at how we might be able to do pharmaceutical sort of design poo, which is an interesting.
What do you mean, like put poo in?
Well, essentially like poo is bacteria, right, and things like that. So you would insert, I don't know how they're going to sell this to the consumer, but you would insert the bacteria or probiotic that was most suited to your unique gut microbiome, and then it would be making it to the right place and populating based on your...
You know what though? We say that now, and like right now I'm like, I would never do that. But...
Wait till Andrew Huberman tells us to do it.
He's like the figure. But no. But I was like relating so much to what you were saying when you were like, all the doctors were saying my blood's fine, my stool test is fine, but my stomach is not fine. Like it hurts, I'm bloated, I'm in a bad mood, I'm whatever. When you haven't gone to the toilet in a while as well, and you're feeling uncomfortable and you feel ugly and your mental state is shit, you would literally do anything to fix it. Like you would try anything. Like you can swear if you want.
Oh,
it's
fuck,
fine.
okay. I've got the worst language. Somebody actually pulled me up. They're like, you need to stop swearing so much. I'm just like, I'm Australian.
No, this is fine. But you would do anything. Like that's how bad it can be. And that's how important the gut is. Like if I had one thing I could fix in my life and to improve my life, the only thing I can think of is literally having a new gut.
Yeah.
Like a gut that actually worked correctly.
Yeah. Well, we need to get this looked into for you, because there is so much misinformation out there to actually get a resolve on it, because there is usually a solution with this stuff. And to everybody listening, I come from a family of doctors, but most people, like, we presume and we put a lot of trust in people of authority, whether that be police or doctors or whatever. You need to remember, it's still like doctors are still learning as well. Like if you know something is wrong with your body, keep going back. And particularly if you're a woman, we already know statistically that women are more likely to be dismissed and to literally die because they're ignored for being dramatic and stuff like that. So keep going back time and time again. Colon cancer and things like that are actually rising in the young. It's super important you advocate for your health. If you know something's wrong, they tell you everything's fine, keep going back. Go to another doctor, get a second opinion. They're not gods. Like they do get it wrong.
Well, and also they're just trained. Like they're just taught something. Like a doctor is like most of them are like doctors of medicine.
Yeah.
You know, they're like they learn how to utilize drugs to resolve problems. Like that's what they're taught.
Yeah.
But you know, they're not. That's not the only way to fix something.
Oh no.
You know, in fact, you could argue it's. I mean, I could make the argument that, and a compelling one at that it's almost the not as good way because it doesn't solve the root cause. It doesn't solve the problem. It puts a Band-Aid on the problem rather than actually resolving why what's causing the gut to do that.
Absolutely. And when we were looking at the whole space as a whole and why these issues are rising and developing, part of the problem is quite literally we're the antibiotic generation, right? Particularly my generation. Our guts are really undiverse. When we do come into like contact with something that is potentially damaging for the gut, right? 70% of the immune system's in the gut. We now have a weakened, I guess, gut immune system. So when we do face these things that are, you know, say maybe we go to Bali or we get food poisoning or we get an illness, we're not as able to defend ourselves off anymore, which actually causes long-term damage to the gut. And that's being fueled by a lot of things in the Western world, a lot of things in our food. Like it's at the end of the day, and I always say this to people, they're like, what's the best diet to eat? And I'm just like, the diet that is the real food that came from the real planet, like that is what we would design to digest. That is what has the right amount of fiber, the right amount of sugar. Like even when you look at a lot of these juices and like health products and stuff like that, it's like you've removed the fiber content. The fiber content exists in nature for a very good reason, and that is for satiety, and that is to make sure you do not overconsume that sugar and your blood sugar doesn't peak too much. Like all of these metabolic issues and all of these gut issues are honestly being fueled by the way we consume food, the way we live our lives, and also the way we connect with each other too. Like all of these components come into our health. Like it's not just about, you know, what you do or what you supplement with, or it's about the whole picture, right?
But I always I completely agree. Like if you're only eating whole foods basically, and not even just whole foods, honestly. Like I even try to go organic, and now I'm literally building a greenhouse at the farm so I can just grow my own stuff.
Yeah. I'd love to do that.
It's the best ever.
Yeah.
Once it's done, once it's done, I'm good because I had to. It's too big. I can't eat it. So I'm gonna get like a group of Cub members, whoever just wants to, like they can subscribe. They can just put $2,000 a month, but that gives them all their fruit and veg, all they want. I'll send it out. I'll get a farmer to send
That'd
it out.
be
to
awesome.
them. Wouldn't it be great?
Yeah,
and
that'd be an awesome
like real food. Like, no like.
And you've got the dirt, which people don't. The dirt's really important.
Oh well, I got the best dirt.
Yeah,
like your farm's.
You got the best dirt.
Yeah, I got the best
got all the gossip, honestly, all the dirt.
I got everything, and it just grows beautiful fruit and beautiful veg at the moment. But sorry, if I eat at a restaurant, like a lot of people like that, I'm obviously using myself as the example, but when I eat at a restaurant, like I almost don't eat at restaurants anymore because if I do, I know I'm going to have stomach problems. Yeah. If I cook at home though, I'm pretty much sweet.
Yeah.
So I don't know what restaurants are putting in their food. I think it's just like high sugar or cheap oils, or I haven't figured out exactly what it is. But when I go to a restaurant, I always have a stomach problem. If I eat at home, I'm fine. Yeah. Have you found that?
Look, when you eat at home, you're probably eating foods that you know don't trigger your gut, right? So you're avoiding, and we talk a lot about this at FixBIOME, but realistically, your gut should be robust and healthy enough that you can go to a restaurant and eat without problems. Like I used to be the same. I couldn't go out. I actually had really bad anxiety around it. Like I had to restrict a lot of foods. It made me really underweight. Like, you know, there were a lot of things that went along with having pretty bad gut issues. But as a whole, your gut should actually be healthy. Like that, I'm not saying that the food in the restaurant is good for you, or
but you should be able to. Yeah,
you should be able to handle it. You shouldn't need to. If you don't have celiac disease or you don't have, you know, some sort of deficiency, you should actually be able to digest lactose and gluten. Like, and so many people are saying that they can't now, and you know, self-diagnosed gluten intolerance, but they're not celiac, is because there's an imbalance in their gut, right? So,
how does your company actually solve, or how do your supplements actually help people? Like, how does it actually work?
So we actually take like most companies obviously introduce a new strains of bacteria, right? But we use natural ingredients to influence the gut microbiome, but we also look at the actual structural integrity of the gut. So when we considered where are these symptoms coming from, right? You know, people complain of bloating, you know, irregular bowel movements, blah, blah, blah. So we looked at the mechanisms behind that. So most people don't know this, but there's a sweeping motion that goes through your gut every 90 minutes. That can be disrupted by any sort of damage to the gut. So like if you've had a virus or, you know, other conditions or even just stress is going to slow that down and cause problems. So we have certain ingredients in there that have what's called prokinetic properties, which help with that movement. We also look at the gut lining. So your gut lining, and where actually all of these things that we see like mental health issues, skin issues, etc., come from is due to intestinal permeability. So our gut, I guess, acts as a very selective sort of drawbridge. So we're supposed to let the nutrients out, but, you know, keep the waste in. And there's a reason if you get shot in the gut, you're quite likely to die, right? There's a lot of waste and there's a lot of crap.
Because of the bacteria?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that there's a lot of byproducts that go on in the gut, right? So what happens when you see bloating, that's actually not like a little bit of bloating is at the end of the day. Like that's totally normal, right? Your food's got to go somewhere. But when we see these big bloats, that's actually causing stretching of the intestines, right? Which is making this very selective drawbridge loose. So when you eat, you're now, this mechanism sort of compromised, right? So your waste products are now going into your bloodstream. So what your body does is it mounts an immune response, which goes and responds to that. And when we feel sick, most people are like, oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I just had a light bulb moment. I was like, so that's why you get bad skin.
Yeah.
Your hair might fall out. You might get eczema and all this type of stuff. It's because your body's triggering an immune response to the bacteria that's being let into your body from your gut.
Hair's a little bit different. Hair's actually usually because you're no longer absorbing properly, just like the nutrients that are required in the gut. But in terms of the skin issues and the feelings of anxiety and like the link to, you know, mental health, it's because there's things being released into your blood which are crossing the blood-brain barrier that shouldn't be there naturally. And when we feel sick, right, most people are like, oh, it's the whatever it is. No, it's actually your immune response. That's what makes you feel sick. That's what makes you feel hot. That's what makes you feel unwell. It's all the things that have been released into the bloodstream. So that inflammatory response is what then causes these things. That's why there's links with arthritis. That's why there's links with psoriasis, acne, and all of those kinds of things.
And so how did you cure your gut, and then how did you turn that into a business? Because that's essentially what happened.
Yeah. So what happened is we started going through the research and I started sourcing different ingredients myself, right? And I'm like, okay, according to the research, this should help with the, you know, tight junctions and this should help with my I reckon I spent probably $15,000 on this problem. Like I was so desperate. It was genuinely like ruining my life. And it just wasn't working. And I went and spoke. I was, like I said, I came from a medical background, some gastroenterologists. I'm like, I'm trying all of these things. Why isn't it helping me? Like, you know, in theory, this ingredient, say take berberine, should be doing X, Y, and Z, or like L-glutamine should be doing this. Why am I only getting partial or no relief? And they're like, you're making a lot of presumptions here, Jasmine. A, you're presuming that whatever ingredient there is active, like in the bottle, like that's thing one. Then you're presuming that it's making it past the mouth, then the stomach, then it's dispersing correctly, and all of these components have been factored into. And you also have to consider you're no longer working with a drug, right? So the good thing about drugs is they're the same every single time.
There's some certainty.
Yeah, there's
consistency.
Yeah, consistency. They're like, what you really need to do when we do these studies on, say, these particular ingredients, right, what we're looking at is the active component of them. So we're not looking at like the flour, we're looking at the X part of the flour. So if you really wanted to make something or create something, you'd need to go and look at, okay, what is it from this ingredient that I want? Can I get that in an extract? Can I blah, blah, blah? What would be the best way to stabilize that? Should I put it in a carrier oil? And we actually got very, very lucky with the product, right? I wanted to make one product. I wanted it all to be in one thing, but we couldn't combine the ingredients and keep them stable if we put them in all the one thing. So, and quite literally, I don't think the company...
So you end up with a bigger product range.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. But the thing is, like, that actually made the business. Like, that was strategic because therefore we had to have a system and there was a higher order point, which allowed us to go into a more saturated market and all those kinds of things. So it was a blessing in disguise. But I invested everything that I personally had into our first product run, trying to make something after we'd come up with a formulation that we thought would work. And the capsules weren't strong enough to hold our formulation and they bust. And I was like, it was only about 10% of the run, but it went all over all the other capsules. And I remember I thought my life was over. I was just like, this is it. It stunk too. Like, it stunk of our oregano oil. And because that was one of the things in it. It was a hard time.
I imagine.
Yes.
And what did you do?
Well, I wanted to see if the product would work if the TGA is listening, it would not work if it would assist in helping the gut. So the ones that we had, we got them out and we got them testing in people that we knew, used that and managed to do negotiated with our manufacturer about whose kind of fault it was, like blah, 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 because it was our custom formulation, but there were guarantees around it. So we managed to get a discounted, much smaller run, and I was able to fund that, and then we could make up because we have 2 other SKUs in our system, and obviously we
What's
sell
an
in 3 pack.
SKU?
Oh, I always forget. I used to ask questions like that and be like, oh, and now I just need to talk about it like it's second nature. So that's a unit. So like this drink bottle we've got on the table here is an SKU and your headphones. But we have 3 products, and obviously selling a system of 3 and got a little bit of that run redone so we could still sell some of the 3 packs, and with that money from the 3 packs I then reinvested that back into that. And we also had to change manufacturers because the hard thing, people are always like, why'd you start manufacturing in America? And I'm like, because I needed specialist equipment to make our like the product, right? We knew that, and based on my own experience, like I wanted to make something that I knew would actually have an impact on the gut, right? And there were only 2 manufacturers here in Australia that had that machine, and I was way too small for them. They basically laughed at me. Well, one of them didn't laugh at me. They're now our Australian manufacturer today, did not go back to the other one, but they just wouldn't put me on their lines. They're like, no, we only run this machine for blah, blah, blah. And so we had to go over to the US and started there, but...
And so what is the actual product? Like, how does it work? So let's say, like, I'm probably going to start straight after this chat. We'll talk about how I can get on it or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how does it actually work? So what does someone take?
Okay, so you're going to take 3 capsules, and you're going to take them twice or 3 times a day, depending on how bad we'll talk about.
I'll take it 4 times a day.
We'll talk. Don't do that. We'll talk about your bowel habits, and I'll tell you the right amount of time you should be taking that amount. But it works by influencing the gut microbiome, influencing the way that it functions, and also going in there and trying to help rebuild that. So if you're struggling with bloating, that actual lining for those other issues that are external. So it takes a very multifaceted approach and aims to really, I guess, get down to the root cause.
And how long would I take them for? So I'm taking 3 tablets 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Each tablet has a different component that, like, a different thing it does, because obviously you said you couldn't fit them all in one, or they wouldn't work together in one thing. Which means better business model wise, I guess. So like every problem has like a positive.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
Once you learn that in business, like business just gets so much better because you're like, yeah, it's not a problem because now I can do this.
This company started with me shitting the bed on my partner on our first trip away. Like, that's what, I'm not joking. Like, what a way to bond. Like, I don't, maybe that's why we're not together, but.
That'll do it.
Yeah. See, there's a silver lining in absolutely everything. So.
But see, even that was probably a good thing.
I actually think just in life, when you zoom out on every bad thing that happened to you, in the grand scheme of things, you probably wouldn't change it.
Yeah, 100% when you look back. Tell me about one of the things I noticed is your mental health when you have a bad gut.
Oh yeah.
It's probably one of the biggest issues with having a bad gut, I found, was that you become angry, you're kind of short of fuse, you're not positive, you're not viewing things in a positive light. How does the gut impact someone's mental health?
Right. So think about it like this. Your body is like, are you happy when you're tired? No. Are you happy when you're sick? No. Like, if every time you eat you're facing a mild immune reaction, you're actually in a compromised state constantly, and there are things leaking out into your bloodstream that shouldn't be there. And then can cross the brain to blood barrier. And there's also other things, right? Like it affects our hormones, it affects our metabolic health, it affects our blood sugar levels. Like everybody says a calorie is a calorie, right? But actually a calorie is what your body can extract. And there have been studies in rats, and we're not allowed to do this in humans, where you change the gut microbiome of a fat rat versus a skinny rat. You swap them around. So you do, you take their poo and you repopulate their guts, and the skinny rat, feeding them the same amount of energy, will actually get fat, and the fat rat will actually get skinny. So our gut influences so much more than we understand, and there are so many mechanisms that play into that mental health piece.
I was doing a bit of study myself at one point, and I actually found a study. I don't know if they did it or what it was, but it was something about they put the microbiome of a happy person in a chronically depressed person, and that person did have an improvement in their mental health.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, isn't that amazing how, your gut is almost controlling your happiness?
Oh, and there's been a recent study that shows it even controls your motivation and how likely you are to exercise. And it's like our gut controls us, but we also have control over our gut as well. Like a lot of people, we can influence our gut microbiome, and in fact we do every single day with what we do. So how much we move around, what we eat, what we supplement with, how even often our migrating motor complex is sweeping through properly. All of these things have an impact. Even eating, we would digest a meal better if we ate it together rather than alone, which is super, super interesting, because humans were designed, because you would feel safer just naturally.
Yeah.
And I would feel safer if we were out in the wild, if we were both sitting down, which is, eating, which is in a kind of vulnerable position that a bear is less likely to come and attack me and kill me.
That's so interesting.
But nobody ever thinks about these things, and all that impacts your gut.
Yeah, humans need each other.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, but it's easy to dismiss why would I digest better if I was alone rather than being with people? Well, the answer is actually obvious. It's
evolution.
Evolution. If you were with people,
Safety.
you were safer,
so you don't die.
Relaxed. Yeah, isn't that amazing?
People just don't think about these things, and even just there was a fascinating talk on just friendship alone extends your life expectancy. Like not being alone, like not having a good network.
It's the number one
you.
factor, actually.
Yeah.
Your they call it. I think the words they use to describe that study is your intimate daily relationships, or interactions or something. So it does include your family, your friends, and those, but it also includes a conversation with your barista, speaking to your doorman if you have one, or these daily relationships, these strengthened relationships. They're the number one factor towards longevity of life, above all else, above food, water, health, exercise. Socializing is basically community is the number one way to survive.
Absolutely. It's so important, and it makes sense from an evolution perspective, these interactions that we have. And I think we miss, and that's one of the things I actually really love about Cub, is it's bringing like-minded people together, right, that all come from different perspectives and things like that. But it's these interactions. And for me personally, I believe you can have different friends and from different people, and I can say all of my friends are so different. Like the people at Cub I'm having different conversations with than my yoga teacher, or somebody that I'm talking to about, I don't know, boys or whatever you want to call it. But all of these things fill you up and make your day positive. And even just talking, like you said, to that doorman and knowing that you are proximal to other people and in a safe environment is what makes our body feel safe. If you're in isolation, if you sit behind the phone, if you're not actually having these face-to-face interactions, you don't understand how that's impacting your body and mental health on a level that you're not even consciously aware of.
And literally, I read a study yesterday. I'm trying to act smart. It wasn't a study. It was a news article.
I read it on BuzzFeed.
I read a news article of someone who studied that basically said that our young generation, I can't remember which, there's too many I've gotten older now, so there's just all these different generations. I don't know which one's which anymore. But the young generation are the most unhappy in history.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it's from it was in relation to social media. So they were using TikTok and I think Meta or Instagram or something as
Absolutely.
A core metric of that. But even if you think of social media in general, it may seem like you're connecting more with people, but you're really not. You're actually much further apart from people. Like you've lost that. And then you add, in addition to that, COVID that they had to go through and they're locked in their houses. And then you add, because of COVID, now you got the work from home situation, which even creates more separation from them and other human beings on a daily basis. Like, no wonder they're depressed. They haven't had an opportunity to connect.
Absolutely. I could go on about the impacts of social media. It's short-term dopamine, right? So those likes, that validation, that stuff you get, that's not genuine connection, and it's not a replacement for it. Like, but you know, we go and seek it. We think it's real. Not the same. It doesn't do the same for us. And honestly, like in full transparency, I used to use my Instagram in a toxic way. So I was in the fashion industry, and you know, used to post all those photos of like you're living your best life, and it's like, what was the point of that? Like, it was so unfulfilling, even for the person on the other side, right? Like, it's so unfulfilling. And just the other day, I actually still struggle with anxiety when I get on planes, right? And I had to go and talk at a conference, and I made a post about, you know what, I can still go here as a business owner and talk at this conference, even though I had a panic attack on this plane. And if you're also going through stuff like that, you're not alone. It doesn't make you an incapable human, but trying to use social media as a way of, you know, still showing the things that you like and you think are cute and whatever that might be, but also the other side.
Yeah, but where I think it falls, like, it's very hard for people to just be real. I reckon it's that everybody is concerned who's, like, how people are going to judge them, their life. Oh, they're not going to like me if I'm not really beautiful, really popular. Look at all the restaurants. I'm going to the hottest restaurants. Like, they might not like me. But then I actually think it switches the other way, which is like, so one side of Instagram is like, look how perfect I am. But then the other side of Instagram is like, go out of my way to show you. And it's almost like a fake showing you, like, look how imperfect I am.
Yeah,
you know, like,
it's like a brand.
Yeah, but
like,
both are fake. It's
it's like everybody exists on the spectrum, right? Like, it is like, at the end of the day, social media is never going to be an accurate reflection of who somebody is. The only way to get to know somebody is, I don't know, go and travel with them, go and see them when they're sick, go and spend Sunday morning when you're
actual time together.
Exactly.
You know, like, imagine, like, those likes aren't actual likes. In fact, the person probably doesn't even like you.
Exactly. 100%. I've always been pretty, I would say, in terms of things, I've always been a little bit outspoken and not too scared to say how I feel on things. Whereas, and even when in business, people are like, should I just like it to be embarrassing, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, at the end of the day, and I've actually found this a really powerful technique. When you don't want to do something or you're too scared to do something, right? Really think about why, and like, why are you too scared to do it? Is it because of, and often when you identify it, it's like, it's Molly in grade 6 that said this about you, that are you really going to let what Molly might think of you, who you haven't spoken to, who literally wouldn't even show up at your funeral and would not remember you 3 weeks after your funeral, dictate how you live your life? So like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, and you need to live your life for you and whatever feels right, and you need to live your life according to your values and your morals and what fills you up, and that's different for everyone.
Yeah, well, I mean, but it's amazing how this whole conversation started from the gut.
Yeah,
you know, it's
okay.
You're actually safer.
Yeah,
you digest better. You're safer when you have people around you eating that you have good relationships with.
Yeah.
Tell me, how does alcohol impact the gut?
Yeah, okay. So alcohol as a whole, I mean, there's actually been a growing trend of young people, and I think this circles back to the growing mental health problems of the younger generation who are going off alcohol. Alcohol as a whole, so every
time I make a reaction, you're like, oh shit, should I stop?
No, sorry. I'm just like,
I just get so excited. I'm like, oh.
But what I was going to say, it's obviously not great for us as a whole. I've never been a good drinker, but it does actually have certain effects on the gut. So it, like champagne in particular, it fastens up your gastric emptying. It also has empty, I guess, energy in it with nothing else. It's not the best thing in the world, but we kind of have a rule. It's like everything in moderation, right? You can't just walk around in a bubble, getting your 9 hours of sleep every single night, doing your ice baths, your breath work, and being completely unstressed by the world and don't enjoy living. Like, but should you be drinking it every night? Yeah, no. Like, it's not going to help your gut. It's not going to help anything in your life.
Because I definitely find that if I drink alcohol, especially if it's regularly, my gut gets worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Do you drink beer?
What effect? No, that wouldn't be my regular drink. I'd have
Yeah,
a
okay.
scotch probably.
Yeah, okay.
But to be honest, it could be anything. And what impacts it the most is wine. I don't even drink wine because I reckon I'm allergic to it. But if I do have wine, my stomach's bad. I go red, and, like you get red and all that type of thing.
Yeah, right. That's really interesting. There's something called, we haven't spoken about this, allergies, but histamine, right? So there's something called the Dow enzyme in our gut, right, that neutralizes histamine. So all the time we take in histamine. So there are high histamine foods in vinegar. Alcohol is high in histamine, right? And one thing that happens when we have a bad gut, and this used to happen to me, I used to actually swell up and get rashes, and they had no idea why. Like I went and had every test under the sun, but it's because what happens is you start to underproduce the Dow enzyme, which neutralizes these histamines and have a mild allergic reaction, so that, in some people, I'm not saying that this is the cause of yours because I don't know, I haven't seen it, and you'd need to, go and run a lot of tests to figure it out. But a deficiency in that Dow enzyme can then lead to a mild allergic reaction when you do eat high histamine things. Alcohol is one.
And could it be that, so because you're having allergic reaction while you eat, then your gut's your body's just not digesting the food because it might be inflamed or it might be.
Oh, absolutely.
So that actually makes sense.
And another thing is, in our gut, right, we have these little finger-like projections that help move stuff along, help grab stuff, whatever.
Like mini tentacles?
Yeah. And in a lot of people in the Western world, if you cut us open, which we don't often get to do because the gut's actually really hard to access and study. Most people don't actually know this. We can't study the middle of the gut at the moment. We have no medical mechanism to do it, so we actually have no clue what's going on there. It's like we can stick a camera down there and stuff, but we don't tend to scope it. Like it's really long. It's really hard to get to, and that comes back, I guess, to the trust in medical professionals. Like we don't know everything. We don't know what we don't know, but that's something that definitely goes on there. I've lost my train of thought. That happens a lot.
But you mentioned before, like you've spoken about supplementing a lot, and you mentioned berberine, which I actually take.
Oh, yeah.
But what supplements would you recommend, and is berberine good to take?
Okay, so berberine. Berberine, nature's Ozempic at the moment, right? But is
that what it's?
Yeah,
they say it helps you lose weight.
Yeah. And so berberine's actually super duper interesting, and one of our ingredients that we did a lot of research on, because berberine's actually non-digestible, right? So the aim of taking berberine isn't to get it into your bloodstream, it's to disperse it. So how good your berberine is actually based on the particle size and the drug mill of the berberine itself. So how good your berberine is depends how finely it was milled and how strong the HCI in it is. So, and in Australia, it's actually really hard to get high concentrations of HCI. I know, because I had to change my formulations and like shift them to get the same potency as what we were using in the US. But
and so you use berberine in
yes,
your
we do. We do.
Thing.
Yep.
So what does it actually do?
Influences the gut bacteria balance. So it lets some flourish and others die back in a positive way for a lot of people. So they're calling it nature's Ozempic because it probably influences the bacteria that are quite good at extracting calories and makes it more favourable towards bacteria that have, I guess, are less efficient in that way.
Oh, interesting. And what other supplements would you take, or have you experimented?
We've got lots of different things in our product. So every single ingredient we've included in FixBIOME is aimed at a particular mechanism in the gut. So L-glutamine is very good for the gut. Those finger projections that I was talking about, that's excellent because it helps it move along. It's also great for the mucus lining. But lots of different things can be used to influence different, not just bacteria colonies. So I guess what we're aiming to do, right, in every person is we want to make your gut microbiome thrive for you. I don't want your gut microbiome. You don't want me. We don't live the same life. We don't, you can actually tell where somebody lives in the world based on their gut microbiome. So like somebody in Japan looks very different from somebody in Australia, as it should be. Your gut is 70% of your immune system, so your body's used to different things than my body is. So we use certain ingredients that aim to influence, obviously encourage the growth of good bacteria uniquely to you, but not to an extent where it might potentially overpower. Because like this is the thing, good bacteria and bad bacteria aren't actually really the problem. Like most people don't have bad bacteria. One's just become too dominant. If you had bad bacteria, you'd have like a problem, like a real problem, right? What's happened is an imbalance of bacteria. So the aim is to bring it back into balance, and then the aim is to also address that movement that a lot of people unfortunately struggle with because of modern day stress and the shitty diet we eat and all those things, to keep that migrating motor complex moving regularly, and then to also focus on those tight junctions, helping them restore and come back to, you know, a good place of functioning. There are ingredients that are shown to be helpful for that.
And is it true? So I read that you actually get your initial microbiome from your mum.
Yeah, from being shit on by your mum. And
Is it from that, or it's also from like just coming out of the vagina and having all the
No, you get
bacteria,
you get a healthy dose of shit. Like you're supposed to.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, and that's why C-section babies have less diverse gut microbiomes. You're more likely.
I read that as well.
Yeah, exactly, because you're supposed to get a healthy dose of shit. Like it's actually not, and the same thing goes in life. Like we're actually supposed to eat some dirt, and part of the reason that a lot of people in the space think that gut issues are rising as a whole is because our food is too clean. In Coles and Woolies about 25 years ago, we introduced a new standard of cleanliness, and we started washing all fruits and veg to a ridiculous extent, and that actually undiversified our gut microbiome. So a little bit of dirt's good for you.
Interesting. And so, but if your mum had a bad microbiome,
Yeah.
you could then start with a bad microbiome.
Absolutely. And that's 100% the case. And I was actually reading a study the other day about anxiety, right, and artificial sugars. And there are some that are okay and there are some that are absolutely terrible. But somebody who drank Diet Coke, a study showed, not only could, if your mum was drinking Diet Coke in the womb, you could then develop an increased risk of anxiety. The World Health Organization used to say artificial sugars were fine, like safe, and just last year they had to change the recommendation because new evidence came out that showed it actually damages the DNA of the gut, like going back to that structural damage, and they're like, oh, we're not sure now. So we've retracted saying that it's 100% safe because it probably most definitely is not.
So, sorry, you said that was for like fake sugar?
Yeah, artificial sugars.
Yeah.
Like people, this is one thing. Everyone demonizes sugar, right? Sugar is fine. Sugar with fiber, totally fine.
Which is like fruit, yes?
Yeah, fruit.
Yeah.
Like sugar should come with some fiber because you're not supposed to be able to eat 18 oranges because it's not good for you. It's not good for your metabolic health,
too
right?
much sugar.
Yeah, exactly. But you can easily get that in a glass of orange juice. Like the average glass of orange juice has about six oranges in it. I'll give you 6 oranges to see how you go with them. But that amount of sugar shouldn't be there. And that fiber also has an effect on your insulin levels, right? So we don't want our insulin levels peaking too fast because that's where we get, the risk of type 2 diabetes and things like that. So all these foods in the Western world are really influencing our gut. And when artificial sugars as a whole, yes, you can't digest them. You can't get the calories. Where do you think they're going? There's a reason that some of them will give you the shits and stuff like that. There are bacteria in your gut which can digest them and can ferment them, and then it causes those bacteria to grow at a disproportionate rate that is unhealthy. So we get a lot of people who are gym junkies. So if you're a gym junkie and you're listening, or you love your protein bars and stuff like that, I can almost guarantee you got gut issues because those things really influence the gut microbiome in a negative way. Because they make like particular bacteria colonies grow in a way you can't digest the sugar, but there are certain bacteria that can. They grow, they thrive, they start to imbalance things. You start to fart horrible farts and have a very poor gut, and that gas, I guess, that those bacteria can produce then causes stretching of the gut lining, and then you get all those other issues. So you start with one issue and then you manage to cause yourself like 6 other issues. And that's why even with product development, you can't just influence it back into a healthy state and think that you've resolved the problem, because there's now like damage. There's been party going on in that gut. So
you know what though? It's almost like human beings just need to stop fucking with things. Like they're too smart for their own good. Like, it's an orange, eat the orange. You don't need to get 100 oranges and squish them all together and put them in thing and make it readily available. Like, you don't need it. Like, just eat the orange. Like, don't change it. Don't artificially thing it. Don't spray it so nothing else around it grows.
Yeah.
Don't, just eat the fucking orange.
Yeah. Just like humans would be if we just like went outside, ate real food, actually talked to people, were, open and honest, valued community more and face-to-face connection and all those kinds of things, we would be so much healthier.
Yeah. Have you followed or read anything from Bobby Kennedy Jr.?
I might have. But
I mean, he's obviously a political figure, which is always controversial, but he's huge. He's super knowledgeable about basically foods, and pharmaceutical industry, but mostly foods, and the issues that are happening in food manufacturing that are causing like major issues for people's health. You should totally check him out.
Yeah, no, I absolutely I will. There are so many things. I actually knew somebody who worked at one of the big food companies, and obviously from a business perspective, a lot of people here are business owners, so this makes sense from a business perspective. But we actually stick people in sensory labs. We figure out how much fiber we should take out, how much sugar we should put in. So big brands like, I really shouldn't say this, but literally will...
Don't say the brand.
But the big companies do this, like all of them, to be honest, where they stick people into a lab and they say at what rate will this person consume the most of my product? And the product might be chips, or the product might be tomato sauce. So how much sugar, how much salt, and how much fiber do we have to essentially remove to get you to consume this product in the highest amount and create the most demand, right? So we have natural mechanisms in the body that control our hunger and fullness. Like obesity is a really interesting thing. People didn't used to be fat. We didn't used to be that, like the number one reason people are going to die is metabolic conditions because of what we're eating, right? And it's the food industry. But we take the stuff out that controls humans' natural hormones, right? So the leptin, which is something that should make you feel full, and fat and protein and fiber all essentially are the most important things that play the role in satiety, and also insulin regulation to make sure things aren't hitting our bloodstream too quickly, and natural. Like our body's not designed to become overweight, right? So the food industry has done real damage to, I think, the quality of human health.
We won't go too much into it now because I want to ask you about your business, but I've read even things like the food industry is very heavily behind, and pharma can very heavily be behind, like, make normalizing being overweight and it being fine, and and like each to their own. You want to be whatever you are, be whatever you are. Yeah. But it's obviously healthier to be healthy. Yeah. Like that should be a kind of a core message.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that, I mean, we'll stay away from that subject.
Yeah,
but
we probably should.
Yeah, definitely.
Laura just sent me a message. I want to talk just before we finish, just a bit more about your company.
Yeah.
About your business.
Yeah.
So how long ago did you start?
So it really, I find it hard to answer this question because we started as an education platform. So that's actually, I guess, the start of our business.
Which was when?
When did my gut issues start? Almost 4 years ago now, 3 years ago, something like that. But we launched the product probably, I think 2 years ago now was the first time we came to market. So we sold out 5 times since then. We had really rapid growth because we had that customer base from the beginning, from that.
Because you had the content going on.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how people can create like community before creating product.
Yeah. And I think what's a really interesting thing too for, because we are lacking that community, right? People are actually turning to brands, which is actually a consideration for brands now, because you have to be really careful about what you say, because they're getting their identity, which is so wrong, from what they consume. Like, I'm this person, I buy from here, and I'm therefore a part of that community. And it's all toxic, but there is actually that element going on. But I think it's a great example of give value first and build trust, and you might actually be able to make it in a saturated market. I think on our first day, and like as a new company, I'm asking some people to put stuff in their mouth like that will influence their gut micro. Like, you kind of not like, oh yeah, we'd love to try that. But I think we did, I don't know, it seems like nothing now, but like $6,000 of sales the first day we went to market because we'd built that, and there were people there that were willing to touch it, to try it. And then they became our brand, sort of ambassadors, and it really helped them. And then we were able to utilize their feedback and their testimonials in advertising, and just really grew from there. And the customers kept coming back. So, yeah.
But I love the idea of a company focusing on providing value and building trust before selling a product. Then if the product you sell does solve the problem and helps people, it's just going to be a recurring cycle.
That's business though, right? Like, why would I go to a lawyer that I think they don't know what they're doing? Like, I'm not going to. Why would you go to an accountant that doesn't know what they're doing? Like, why, if you do not trust that person to produce that product, and when it comes to health things, like, you need to genuinely have built that faith. But it's in any aspect, whether you're in service, whether you're in product. It's like, why should I buy from you your product? What makes it better? What makes it different? And particularly in my industry, from every other piece of expensive thing that I've tried. And you need to be able to communicate that. So by educating your customer, giving them, giving without giving back. We're not going to, FixBIOME, we're not going to be the right solution for everyone by any means. Not everything will be right for every person, but we still genuinely want to help, and I genuinely care about my customer, and I care about this problem as a whole, because I think it's really worrying. We will give them a list. Go back to your doctor, and we'll say this is general advice only, blah, blah, blah. But go back to your doctor and make sure it's none of these things, because now we know it's not anything that we're helping with. We know that you need to look at these things. And if you haven't, and some people have actually come back to us and been like, holy shit, I had endometriosis. Or because
endo's had a big spike, hasn't
it?
So many people I know have endometriosis.
Yeah, it's I actually think in the next 10 years, and we'll circle back on this in just 3, that it's going to be strongly linked to the gut microbiome. And there is, I would love FixBIOME to be able to actually fund some of the research behind that. I really want to use the company, and we're actually through CUB aiming to start doing that with the Gut Foundation, really helping progress the space forward, because people don't want to talk about poo either, and people don't want to talk about shit, and they don't want to talk about their gut issues, and they don't want to talk about their mental health and things like this. So if we can start talking about it, researching it more, getting it into the forefront, then we can help people.
Well, I think that's a great place to finish, and thank you so much for coming on. To our listeners, if you want to get in contact with Jasmine, you go to cub.club/podcast and find details there, along with favorite book, best book recommendation, favorite quote, and you can find a website as well. If you want to catch up with Cub on social, it's at Club of United Business on Instagram. Thank you so much again. We actually don't leave, because we're going to keep talking.
Yes.
I want to start your supplements.
Yeah, no,
maybe
we'll talk about it.
Maybe you can fix me.
No, absolutely. We do. The thing is, though, just to anybody listening, we designed something that was aimed to have an impact, and that has an impact. We have something called die-off that can happen in some people because of that intestinal permeability, where some of our best customers actually felt horrendous as the start part, because we were getting rid of things that,
the cut. So when you start taking something, because of the changes it's making to your biome, it can actually cause you to feel a little bit sick before it makes you feel better.
So that intestinal permeability we spoke about, right?
That's how you know it's working, though.
Yeah. Well, it depends on your level of intestinal permeability. So it can still be working, and you can be one of those people who your drawbridges are okay, right? But if you have really shitty drawbridges, and then we go and say we get rid of some colonies of bacteria that are overpopulated, we start to grow other ones that are underpopulated. What do you think, like we spoke about with the mental health piece, right? That gut bacteria releases byproducts into the blood. That's what's causing all the things. When you get rid of them, you smash them all at once, and you release all of their guts into your bloodstream. So if you've got a high level of intestinal permeability, that's going to all come out all at once. And it has a technical medical name. The gut's not the only sort of thing we see it with. You can actually see it in antibiotic treatment as well and things like that. But your body then has to go and essentially mount an immune response to go and get rid of that stuff. But it's really interesting. So it only happens to probably about 5 to 7% of people, but we really have to educate our customer on that, because it's not.
I think it's important, but it's important. Yeah. It's like everything could have a side effect, and honestly, you'd prefer the side effect come from.
I'd rather
exactly.
I'd rather create something that worked than create something that people think does nothing and they don't feel anything for it. The aim is to have impact.
Yeah. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Anyways, bye.